Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining this session, part of our virtual leadership conference. I'm really excited to be here with our coaching practice leader, André Keil. I'm Emily Viviani, CCL's social content manager. But today we are talking with André all about kind of the power of coaching and how developing coaching skills as a leader and amongst just the culture in your organization, it might be the next best step that you can take to move your organization forward. Andre is also going to share 4 key behaviors that we really encourage leaders adopt to kind of learn coaching skills that we think are really key in the transitional conversations that so many of you are having right now. So before we jump into that, Andre, I want to give you the chance to introduce yourself, maybe share a bit about your background and just what got you interested in coaching.
Absolutely. So it's really good to be here, Emily. I'm glad to be part of this day. So my background is really actually what I like to say is if if I didn't need to pay the bills, I would do this work for free. Is really what I like to say. So it's the kind of job where I get to do really what I'm passionate about, which is executive coaching. But I get to do it at a large scale. So I work. My role here at CCL is coaching practice leader. And I work with about 700 coaches globally in a couple of different capacities. So one of them is really designing coaching engagements for leaders all over the world, and then working very closely with our coaches to help implement those engagements. But then I do a lot of work around coaching skills development as well. And so that's a big piece of what we do at CCL. I actually had my start at CCL in Brussels, so worked in the EMEA campus of our organization, and have been with CCL for about 9 years, and about 3 years here in Greensboro, working here really just in my dream job. So, and I'm excited to talk about coaching today, specifically about coaching skills, and how those are how those could be impactful for organizations.
Awesome. Thanks, Andre. Well, would you mind, you told us a little bit about your background. Could you start us off maybe by saying sort of the history of what the coaching practice within CCL has looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so really, coaching has always been part of what CCL's DNA has been. So even like when we started way back in the day, we were one of the first organizations to bring 360s into corporate leadership. And so that requires coaching, because you need a coach to provide feedback for those types of instruments. And so back when we started, coaching was a big part of trying to figure out how to assess someone, right? Really try to understand, so where am I at? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And then do that through challenge and support. In fact, we have this framework called Assess, Challenge, and Support. And this framework actually carried over to some of the ways that we brought coaching skills into leadership. So executive coaching really took off. And what we found is, like, actually these skills are really useful for people to be using internally, as, for example, talent managers or HR professionals, but also for people who are leaders as coaches. But what we've seen over the last couple of years is like this evolution of coaching. So it used to be that, for example, take the word assessment. It used to be kind of an esoteric type of language where it's almost like a little bit clinical, like assessment. What does that really mean? That's sometimes people get a little scared by that. And so what we found is actually people just want to use simple language. They just want to be able to talk in straightforward language that resonates with people in everyday situations. So what we've done over the course of, I would say, even the last 3-4 years, is strip down our coaching skills programs to really the essentials. We call them the 4 core skills. I'm going to talk to you about them in a little bit more detail later. But really just getting it to the heart of the matter, right? So what are these skills, and how can they be effective? And I see that you have the slide up here now. And so one of the things, well, go ahead, Emily. I'm not sure
No.
you wanted me to ask.
No,
If you
that's
wanted
great.
to ask a question.
I was just going to say that sort of this evolution of coaching within CCL is really interesting, and wondering if you can kind of say how that plays out between how, like, a conversation between a direct report and a manager might look.
Yeah. So one of the things that comes up a lot is, so how do you define coaching? What does that really mean? So for example, Emily, if I go to you and I'm like, hey, let me give you some coaching, that could have a totally different meaning for one person than another person, right? So it really becomes about so one of the pieces that becomes really important for organizations is to define very clearly, what does coaching mean for us? Like, how do you define that? And find a way to define it in a way that's discrete from how you might define other management behaviors. And so that's where that graph that you just had up comes into play. And what we do in our programs is we have people actually walk around, in kind of a continuum, and we ask them a question. We say, take a look at all these behaviors. And so some of these behaviors you might have encountered as someone coaching you or someone having a conversation with you. And it moves all the way from a more directive conversation where it's about telling and solving problems and giving advice to a more developmentally focused conversation where it's really about providing feedback, challenging thinking, listening, and just asking questions. And so one of the things we do, we have some fun with this in the classroom, is we ask people, so when you think about your own development and when you think about where you felt most engaged in the organization, what kind of behaviors did your boss do? Like, if you think about some of the bosses you might have. And the one question we'll ask is, so think about your worst boss. And Emily, I'm going to put you on the spot here and ask you to play along a little bit. So,
Sure.
there's probably hundreds of people watching. So, probably your boss, your worst boss won't even be on. So don't even worry about that. But if you look at this, right, and where would you place your boss on this continuum? What would that look like? This worst
Yeah.
boss.
Definitely worst boss is far on the directive side, that
Okay.
more authoritative style,
Hmm.
not as much room for ambiguity and questions.
Okay. You got some stories? I mean, like, we have to protect the innocent here, but like, do you have an example of that?
I mean, I feel like the boss I'm thinking of was when I worked in kind of a high stress industry, and I guess it was fast paced work, and uh, there just wasn't. It didn't. It seemed like most of the authoritative style that they had kind of thrived on this idea of like pressure, stress, and like not much room for conversation or question.
Yeah. So just do as I say, just get it done,
Right.
and thank you very much. Right?
Right. Not even
Yeah.
thank you very much.
so so what was the impact on you? How did you
I mean, I
feel?
left that job.
You left that job. So how did you feel? Did you feel like I can get some stuff done here, or um
I mean,
like,
it's not a motivating work environment to be in,
yeah.
when you don't feel like you have any real meaningful contributions to the conversation and you're kind of just a robot.
Yeah, exactly. Robot. That's totally the phrase that I was like, okay, well, just do it. Just basically just be quiet and do your job, right? Do what I tell you.
Right.
Um, okay, so that's a really good example. And so when we do this in the classroom, to be totally fair, not everybody goes to that side, right? So there are people who kind of jump from one side to the other, and they have good reasons for that. But what we're hearing a lot, Emily, is the same things that you're saying around, well, actually, I left that job. I didn't see any future there for me, but also I didn't feel empowered. I didn't really think I could do anything else. So now let's turn this around and think about your favorite boss. So your best all-time best boss. What Where was that person on this continuum?
I definitely more on the developmental conversation side, listening, asking questions, giving me the space to feel like I am valuable and making meaningful contributions to the direction that we're heading.
Yeah, yeah. So listening, asking questions, like getting your input, right, and allowing you almost like to fish, right? So, there's that saying like, if you catch a fish for someone, it's like you always have to. I'm mangling the saying. Someone out there is going to know this saying perfectly, but if you teach a man how to fish, he can eat for a lifetime. Is essentially what this comes down to. So let's face it, this is a continuum. All of these behaviors are useful in context, right? So I remember really clearly, I work very closely with a lot of coaches in my organization, right? And so we have a lot of coaching conversations. But can you imagine on the first day of my job, I come in and my boss is like coaching me, but what I really want to know is well, where's the bathroom? And like, can you imagine if he said, well, where do you think it should be? That's just not helpful, right? So like there are certain cases, and on a serious note, now with all of the crisis that we're in terms of coronavirus, there's clearly a lot of telling and problem solving happening, right? There's no doubt. So you have to flex these styles. Now, one of the things that we know about leaders also is that basically the way that you've become successful is through problem solving and through telling people what to do. That's how you got to where you are. But at a certain point, you can't scale that. You can't solve all the problems. You can't tell everybody what to do. So that's where, as a leader, this other side of this continuum becomes so important, because you have to be able to leverage your leadership in that way. Super important. So what we like to say is what I'd like the audience to do is kind of think about, well, where do you feel that you are most of the time? And probably my guess is you're going to spend a little bit of time everywhere. But what we know from our experience is that most people feel more comfortable on this directive side of these conversation behaviors. And the way we set it up in the program, basically, we say, look, like when you go to the gym, you've seen those guys, they have like huge upper bodies, very skinny legs. What we want you to do is we want you to work on a balanced body. And so we want you to focus on these skills on the developmental side and really get clear about, how do you do that? How do you ask questions? How do you listen more effectively? How do you challenge thinking? And so that's what we try to do in our trainings.
Awesome. Yeah, so I know that I mentioned in the introduction to this conversation that you are going to get specific about kind of those 4 behaviors that we recommend leaders adopt to be better coaches. Do we want to dig into those now?
Yeah, let's take a look at those. I think that's good. So we talked about these 4 core skills, and really, again, these are skills that are from coaching, but we put them in the context of having better conversations. So even in our programs, and when we talk about this in terms of coaching culture and transformation, we just say, look, this is not necessarily about coaching. We're putting coaching skills into better conversations. And it's also not about having like the best conversation. It's about just having a better conversation every day and working on these skills a little bit at a time. And the reason why they're so behavior based, they're so descriptive, is because like when you're in the fog of war, when you're like in the heat of things, you might not remember all 4. And you might not remember that model that you learned, but you'll remember like 1 or 2 of these skills. And even if you just remember 1, it can make a huge difference, both at work but also in your personal life. So these 4 skills, right? So the first one is really, it's listening to understand. So listening, not to agree or disagree, or not listening to talk next, but truly listening to understand. And so one of the things that we talk about in the program is really, we all start from a place of listening. Like you don't come into a conversation with a blank slate. Like your mind is not empty when you have a conversation. So what we talk about is like, focus on listening from certain perspectives. So we all know active listening and leaning in and really repeating back what people are saying to you. Those are good skills, but we even found those are difficult and sometimes distracting to learn. And so what really works well is just choose a perspective to listen from. So we talk about listening for facts, listening for feelings, and listening for values. And if you listen on those 3 different levels, you're going to get a much better picture of what's going on for that person. You can imagine a developmental conversation. So you're sitting down with your direct report and you're going through the facts. You're like, what are the metrics? What are the KPIs? What have you done? What are you going to work on? If you don't dig into how someone is feeling, then some of that motivation behind those facts might be missing. If you don't dig into what's important for that person in terms of their values, you're not going to really get what's driving them. So that's why we talk about listening from those three perspectives. Part about asking powerful questions, these are questions that are more thought provoking rather than thought providing. So these are questions where if you ask them, you don't already know the answer. This is probably the hardest part as a leader, is engaging in these skills, because as a leader you have some skin in the game. You have an agenda around making sure that the people around you do what you want them to do. And so this part of this framework forces you to let go of some of that, and let go of some of the things that you want to see done, and just count on the other person to be able to make the right decisions. That's not always going to work, but if you have this intention, you start building more trust in the organization. And we all know that work happens at the speed of trust, right? So like, you don't get stuff done if you don't feel like you can trust someone. And if you're always out there solving their problems or answering the questions for them, you're not going to build that kind of relationship. So these powerful questions, they have a ripple effect across not only one-on-one relationships, but across groups and teams in the entire organization. So then there's this piece around challenge and support. Challenge and support is really about balancing both. And the picture that always comes to my mind is someone who's a mountain climber, and they've got all their gear on, and they've got the ropes, bolted into the mountain they're trying to climb. And this, you could tell there's a balance there of support and challenge, right? Because they're supported, there's a structure around them that gives them security and confidence, but they're also in a tremendously challenging position. And so it's very similar to how we show up at work, right? So there's constantly challenges for us. Now, the hard part is like, you have to be able to do both. If you just support someone, if you're only supportive, people aren't going to be very interested in doing the work. It's going to be boring. But if you only challenge, it's going to create a very unsafe environment at work. People are going to be very uncertain about what their limits are in the organization. So the key is to figure out how to balance both. That final skill is really about ending with clear next steps, establishing clear next steps and accountability. So I'm sure we've all been in meetings or have had conversations where, it's kind of like mushy. It's like, well, I think I sort of know what I need to do next, but it's not really clear. And no one is articulating exactly what the next step is. And so closing these conversations with a clear next step is essential. And then building the accountability piece on it is even more essential. So that's the 4 core skills. And like I said, these are skills. I say these are natural but undeveloped skills. So these are skills that we know. So when we talk about these skills in organizations, people are like, yeah, we know this. But the thing is, you have to practice them. You have to live and breathe them. And you have to be able to espouse them in a way that they become effective. And then what we've seen in organizations is like, it creates this ripple effect, right? And so like, if you start asking questions and listening more, you start creating more psychological safety, builds more trust, builds more relationships. And that's how you start transforming an organization. And the language here is key. Like, a lot of cultural transformations don't work because it's just pictures on walls. And what people need is they need a language and a skill set. They need something tangible. So it's all about trying to get people to start talking the same language at the same time in the organization.
That's so helpful. And I see we have a question that's come in that's a nice transition to the next slide that we want to talk through. Someone has been asking or has asked, can we give an example of a powerful question?
Yeah. So in fact, let's go to some of the ways we can ask powerful questions, right? So A good, powerful question is going to be open ended, right? And typically, a good, powerful question starts with what or how. So if you think about it, if you start a question with what or how, those are questions that are action focused. So, like, what can you do? What is possible? How will it look if you go further? How will it look if you say no? Right? Those are open ended, powerful questions. The thing about what and how is super interesting. Like, quick little side note. So, if you are, some of us ruminate about things that happen. We have internal talks and we say, like, a lot of times we say, why? Why did this happen? Why did I do that? Why did that person say to me, right? So what is useful, even if you're doing some self-coaching, is try to convert the why to a what or how question, because then it's like, well, what was it about that situation that impacted me that way, or how did it happen in this way when I thought about that, right? So it puts you more into action. So powerful questions focus on getting you to do something. um, the why question is important. You got to know why you do things, of course, but the what and how are much more action focused. So a powerful question, that the construction of a powerful question, you can never go wrong if you start with what or how. The other piece is just keep them short and crisp, right? Short, simple questions. And probably the biggest thing is to not have them be leading or get into problem solving. And those kind of go hand in hand. So questions like, have you tried this? Did you try my idea? Right? So things like that, they're not as effective as asking questions that where you are unattached to the outcome and the answer that might be given. Um, and then the big part about powerful questions too is you're thinking about it in terms of a gigantic net, and you're just trying to be curious. And so, like, capture as much information as you can. So questions like, tell me more, what else? Those are questions that just give someone so much freedom to explore the things that they want to talk about. So that's a powerful question.
No, that's really helpful. I feel like that those five are a great framework for sort of designing these questions.
Yeah. And, do you want to give it a try? I mean, do you want to, so like, um, are you ready for a little coaching, Emily?
Sure, I'm definitely ready for a little CCL coaching. Let's do it.
It's just me and you, and
However many
who
viewers.
knows how many people are online. Um, so what? So we're going to do a little demonstration. So I'm going to ask you some powerful questions and see if I can try to demonstrate the four core skills that we've been talking about. And so I'll just ask you. So what's on your mind? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I guess, I mean, would it be best for me to share sort of a career challenge or just a challenge in general that I'm facing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's up to you. I mean, like, I think some of those things are intertwined, right? So I think if
Right.
it's something, it could be some kind of opportunity, some kind of thing that's in your way, something that's keeping you up at night, whatever
Yeah.
you think is useful to talk about.
Great. Well, I feel like with everything that's going on right now in the world, and just as we internally at CCL have really done this major pivot in the last couple of months to be focusing more on our virtual solutions. I work within the content marketing group, and that's meant a huge pivot for us as well, just trying new things. A great example is this conference. We've never done anything like this before, and I am really energized. I mean, of course, first, I feel super fortunate to still have a job. And I am really energized by kind of all the creativity and innovation that's happening internally. At the same time, I was coming back from maternity leave in February. So I have a 8-month-old son, my first baby, and I was re-entering CCL, all jazzed about, getting back into the swing of business as usual. And then, of course, this happened. And the daycare that we had him in for 3 weeks is closed. And my husband and I are both juggling, working from home, and I feel this tension between this desire to really be here for CCL when there's so much opportunity and creativity happening, but also feeling like I have been given this chance to have extra time with my son, and just feeling guilty about the tension of that. So
Yeah.
I guess that's maybe what keeps me up at night. Yeah.
No, I can imagine. So what I'm hearing from you is there's almost two things going on for you. On the one hand, you feel like this is really good and there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot to do. But on the other hand, you're like, I'm a new mother and I'm trying to balance my personal life with my work life. Um, and I'm feeling a little bit guilty about how to manage all of that in the right way possible.
Yeah.
And so 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 what what does like a what would like an amazing, if you had a magic wand, what would like an amazing outcome be of this situation?
I guess if I had a magic wand, I wouldn't need any sleep. I could, spend the time that I feel like is needed to do my job well, and also be there for my son as he's like doing new things and changing so much every week.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I don't have a magic wand though.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing from that is that there's something about time there, and that you value time, and that you feel like there's almost not even enough time for you to do everything that you want to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so tell me a little bit more about time. Tell me what that means to you.
Okay. Well, I feel like in general, I used to get a lot more sleep than I do now. And I've never been like a morning person, but
Yeah.
one nice thing about having a baby is that you turn into one. Um, so now generally get up around 6 in the morning, and it's been really nice to kind of have that time with him in the morning, before I get my day going. But then there's also, I feel like I actually always work remotely for CCL. I
Yeah.
am based out of Northern Virginia. So this whole working from home thing isn't all that new to me, but I've found that my calendar has been overloaded with more calls than ever before. So
Hmm.
that's made my work day much busier, and kind of the stuff that needs to get done gets pushed to the evening. So I feel bad, my son typically goes to sleep around 8 at night, and I have maybe an hour and a half with him. So I don't know. I wish it was possible for me to have him, should I go get him right now? The conversation is
Yeah.
just hard to be fully. I'm not very good at multitasking, and it's hard to be trying to do that all the time.
Yeah. So I'm hearing a couple of things. I- I'm I'm hearing that, so some of the things that you're saying sound like, I'm not good at multitasking. I'm not good at some of these other things. It sounds like you feel, and you mentioned you feel a little bit guilty. Um, it sounds like you're hard on yourself. Um,
I guess maybe I am.
yeah, yeah. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think that if there are new parents tuning in, they can probably relate to having this
Yeah,
idea of the type of parent they want to be, super hands-on, but it's exhausting. And
yeah,
it's strange to sort of enter parenthood during this crazy time when you
yeah.
don't like. I am technically with my son all the time, but also not. Um,
Hmm.
so it's been difficult. The 3 weeks that he was in daycare, it wasn't. Again, I guess I feel bad for saying this. It wasn't quite as difficult as I thought it would be. Like it was nice to be like eating my lunch in silence.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but then that quickly changed, and now it's like every free second I have between calls, I feel like I need to be, trying to make him say words and stuff.
Yeah. So what might be some of the things that you could let go of? And I'm not talking about like physical things, but some of the things that you can let go of in terms of how it's supposed to be. Like what if you could throw some of those things away? Like which ones
Yeah,
would you like
I
ditch?
feel I like where this is going. I mean, I think that something that would be helpful for me is if I was able to be more intentional about when I'm at work, just being okay with that.
Yeah.
Not, my husband and I have worked out a system that like there are times that um my son's name is Teddy. Teddy's
Oh,
responsibility is his and mine, and I feel like I need to let go of the emotion that I feel like so compelled to, if I ever have a free second, check in on him,
yeah.
because that's not how it would be in the normal world, and I feel like feeling guilty and being hard on myself just isn't productive. It doesn't help me do better at my job, which is what I'm trying to do.
hmm Yeah. 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 And I'm just wondering, so like just another question. Um, if you were to look back on this, like let's say, you know, 10 years from now, we meet in the street and you say, hey, you know what, Andre, that coaching thing that we did, um, or even not forget about the coaching, the moment in my life when Teddy was this age, what would you want to say? You know what I was really grateful for was,
I think that I would want to say I was really grateful that when I had time with him, I was present, because
yeah, wow,
it's not it's not fair to him for me to be trying to do it all, and when I actually do have time with him, I'm like also checking my email on my phone. He's not
mm,
going to think he has a cool mom
yeah, yeah, that
if
sounds like,
I'm always
yeah,
on my phone. So I feel like I need to be better about recognizing that time that I'm spending with him that isn't quality time just isn't worth it. It's
yeah. And I'm hearing like sometimes we call it a juicy word. I heard a juicy word, presence. So being present. So what's and I know we're gonna wrap this up pretty soon, but what's the value of presence?
I mean, it's reminding me a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about throughout the day, like moving towards building your resilience as a leader. Like I feel like if you are constantly trying to burn the candle on both ends, it's
Hmm
just you're gonna feel depleted. Which I've definitely there have been hard weeks in the past couple months that it's just I don't have the energy
Yeah.
to be good at work and good as a parent. So I think that being present definitely would help me, build my resilience as well.
hmm hmm So what are you taking away from this? Like what would be a good sort of next step?
This is so funny, like a live therapy coaching session. No, I think that I think it was really helpful for you to make me recognize that I feel like I am being a little hard on myself. I think that I'm sure people tuning in can really, it's a challenging time in so many ways for so many people for so many different reasons,
Yeah.
that giving myself a little grace is a powerful thing to do right now.
hmm Yeah. And I'm feeling like a lot of resonance. Like um, I feel that like if it's coming through the screen, you know, like from you. So, but so like let's make it real. So like, what's one small thing you can do to honor this conversation? What's one thing you can do concretely?
I think that I should potentially maybe like make a time on my calendar at the end of the workday that is like Teddy time or something like that. Like
Hmm
that I don't feel that I can count on, even if it's just taking a break from work, that I can count on having 30 minutes in the afternoon towards the end of the day that I can spend with him. So I don't feel this pull every time I go grab a seltzer from the fridge to like
Yeah.
go try and have 3 like uneventful minutes with him. That I
Right.
feel like would be really helpful for me.
Yeah. 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 Well, I think that's solid, and that's like when I'm hearing you say it, that feels good. That feels really good. So I want to make sure we manage the time. I also want to make sure that I recognize that we talked about this a little bit beforehand, and you took this, Emily, to the next level. Like, I'm so impressed by how you did that and how you stepped up. I mean, that's like, it's amazing. So I want to give you total credit for that, and like showing vulnerability. And you could see, okay, so this is us talking and we know each other, but you can see if this plays out in organizations. Like, I think what I'm doing is not overly complicated. It requires vulnerability. It requires us to connect. And for you, you stepped up into being really vulnerable. But you could see if these types of conversations play out at work, like you could it's going to make a difference in terms of how engaged people are, how connected they feel, how much they're willing to work with each other, right? And be able to create safety in the relationship.
No, thank you so much, Andre. This was great. I mean, it was a very calming session. It was otherwise a pretty hectic day for me. So,
It's
um, thank you
yeah,
for suggesting that we do this. This has been great for me as well. And I can definitely see how the people tuning in, taking the time to have similar conversations with the people on their teams can be so
yeah,
powerful and a great step towards change.
yeah, exactly. So I know we have a couple minutes. Emily, you tell me when we're done. I'm good for
Yeah,
anything.
no, I mean, we have our next session is with our senior faculty, Abigail Dunn Moses, and it's going to be a really wonderful overview of 7 ways that
She's great.
organizations can create more inclusion. So a great build on what we're talking about here. I'm not seeing too many questions come in. Hopefully that session was a great illustration of what powerful questions look like in action. But I really want to thank you, Andre, just for taking your time to share your wisdom about coaching with the group tuning in, and also just for giving me some personal guidance as to how to manage kind of everything moving forward during this really challenging time for so many.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say next time we're on LinkedIn Live, let's anytime you want to talk, let's go for it. I'm
Yeah,
good. No,
anytime I need coaching from Andre, I'm doing it live.
I'm teasing, of course, like anytime and this is kind of how it goes, right? And we know how this is how it goes at CCL, and like some of the other organizations I've worked with is like, now we know I can call you, you can call me, and this is kind of the connective tissue that sustains organizations like that. So thank you for stepping into that. It was awesome.
For sure. Thank you so much. So I just want to let everyone know as we wrap up with Andre that our conversation with Abigail, which my colleague Eric Ginsberg is actually going to moderate, is going to appear in a separate stream, and we're going to have a little break to let you guys go stretch your legs, grab a snack. We're starting that conversation at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and so we really hope that you join us then after that, we are just going to wrap up the day with some closing remarks from our president and CEO, John Ryan, and then send you on your way. So thank you again to those who tuned in. And thank you so much, Andre, for showing people what a powerful coaching conversation looks like.
Thank you.